on, ladies and gentlemen? My name is Kevin Checkwitz. This is the Kaged Review, and this is my review, my revisited review for Aquaman. Aquaman was kind of a movie that started a new era in the DCEU. They were failing miserably. They'd have one good movie and a couple of big flops. Not necessarily financial flops, but flops that where like people saw it and just reviled it, man. Like the reviews just tore it apart. And so while the first ones, take Suicide Squad for example. Suicide Squad made a lot of money, but the reviews were so bad that when they came out with Birds of Prey that followed, it was terrible for the DCEU. And so they brought in Walter Hamada to lead up the DCEU division of Warner Brothers. And so he brought in one of his friends and one of my favorite directors, James Wan, to direct Aquaman. And it was really kind of the start of the new DCEU. And it was where they didn't try to make a connected universe. They just wanted to make individual films that were very, very good. And they didn't always tie in together. And there are definitely some discrepancies from Aquaman and Mera's character in the Justice League movie to this new Aquaman solo movie. And so I thought that was actually a very good direction. And I was really excited about this because I love James Wan. He's one of my favorite directors, like I said, ever since he came out with the original Saw movie, which I thought was very creative. And I've always wanted to kind of see him in a big budget movie like this. I've seen him in kind of smaller budget horror movies. And so this was very cool. You got one of my characters from the DC universe and my favorite director helming it. And I got to tell you, it really, really worked. You have Jason Momoa coming in as Arthur Curry, Aquaman, reprising his role from Justice League. Amber Heard reprising her role as Mera. You bring in Willem Dafoe as Vulko, who was kind of a trainer for Aquaman. Nicole Kidman as Queen Atlanna, Aquaman's mother. You have Patrick Wilson as Aquaman's half-brother Orm. He also called the Ocean Master. And you have Yahya Abdul-Mateen II coming in as Black Manta. That was a cool thing for me. I'll be honest. I really love Black Manta. He's a sadistic-ass serial killer in the comics. All around, bad guy, pirate type. And I think once they brought in Black Manta as the Black Manta character, they really killed it. There were some things getting to Black Manta I wasn't quite a big fan of, but we'll get to that. Dolph Lundgren is King Nereus, Julie Andrews voicing Carathan, Jaman Hansu voicing King Rako, who is one of the, there's like 7 tribes of the Atlanteans, and he's the king of one of the tribes. John Rhys Davies voices the Brine King, which is obviously the king of another, the Brine people. And so the story here is that Orm, or the Ocean Master, is trying to make a war with the rest of the normal world. And so in order to do that, in order to become Ocean Master, which is the title of the guy who controls all the 7 kingdoms of Atlantis, he has to convince at least 4 out of the 7 to join his cause. And so he first enlists Dolph Lundgren, King Nereus. He is somebody who kind of is already not really a big fan of man. And with good reason. And so Mera sees what's about to happen and she tells Aquaman, this is what your half-brother is trying to do. We need you to come to Atlantis and try to save both your people and my people. And at first he's very hesitant. Doesn't really want to get involved. He has to assume the position of king. And he's like, I'm no king. And one thing I do love about what they did with Aquaman is they did make him very flawed. He wasn't always making the best choices. And he was kind of, true to he's not really the best role model as a king. But there was an attack where the Ocean Master and the Atlanteans sent this big wave all around the world that threw all the warships and all the garbage that's been thrown into the oceans back on land. And it almost killed Aquaman's father. He was caught up in one of the waves. And if it wasn't for Mira, he probably would have died. And so he decides he's actually going to go down there and try this out. He's going to try to take on the mantle of king. So he goes to Atlantis, and unfortunately, he gets caught before he even gets the chance. And he's in chains in front of Orm. And he winds up challenging Orm to this fight. Supposed to be to the death. And doesn't quite work out the way Aquaman thought it was going to. You know, at this point, he's used to being the strongest person around because he's a superhero on land. You know, he's more powerful than anybody on Earth. But when you deal with the Atlanteans, they're all just as powerful as he is. So he finds himself outdone by Orm. Mira saves him, and then they go on this journey. And unfortunately, the journey does kind of feel a little bit like Indiana Jones, or I heard another comparison that was like Uncharted, which honestly is a great compliment for Uncharted because it's a video game. But I mean, it kind of does feel like that. You know, you've got objects you got to find. You have these traps that you have to go through, these tests that you have to figure out. And it felt very much, you know, Indiana Jones-ish in that way. Unfortunately, sometimes with that, the plot felt a little clunky. You would have a couple of moments that seemed like they zoomed by really quick, and then a couple of other moments where it seemed like it dragged on just a little bit. It actually didn't feel that way too much, but there were points where it's like, you know, maybe the pacing could have been a little bit better. A little bit jumpy. And then with that, you also have a side story that, like, toward the beginning of the movie, you have this pirate and his dad. They're taking over this ship, this submarine. And, of course, Aquaman goes to help out the sailors on the submarine and winds up killing the pirate's father. Of course, the pirate's all pissed off about it and wants revenge. So he goes to the Atlanteans to get powered up. He's like, I don't care about anything. I don't care about money. I just want revenge. I want to kill Aquaman. And so they give him a bunch of Atlantean tech. And with that, he creates the Black Manta, call it armor, I guess. And so there was actually a very, very cool scene while Mira and Aquaman were in, I think it was Italy, and they were trying to figure out some things about where to go next, you know, looking for clues literally through a bottle. And then out of nowhere, here comes Aquaman. And it was a fantastic sequence all the way through. The fight scenes in this movie were very, very well choreographed and always threw in something you hadn't seen before. I mean, this whole movie was something you hadn't seen before. The special effects, especially when you go underwater and you're seeing all these bright colors and the creations of Atlantis itself, it looked phenomenal. But the fight scenes in particular were breathtaking at times. So you have Black Manta come in, taking on Aquaman, and a bunch of Atlantean soldiers taking on Mera. And the whole sequence was amazing. There was actually, in the trailer for the movie, a clip of it, and it just blew me away just from that clip. And thankfully, they actually had quite a bit more in the fight itself. It was pretty drawn out, but really, really fun. At the end of that little fight sequence, Aquaman takes care of Black Manta and kind of half destroys the suit. Really injures Black Manta himself. And really the story here was between Aquaman and Orm. Black Manta was just a side piece that they could kind of put in here. He wasn't in the movie very, very long, but what I saw from the actual Black Manta himself in the costume, I thought was phenomenal. But they're setting up for obviously another Aquaman movie where he's going to have to deal directly with Black Manta. So that's cool. So eventually, this all leads to Aquaman finding a trident that his father had. Well, let me correct myself. It wasn't his father. His father is a man. But it was like the king of Atlantis who went into hiding. And he was still holding this trident that's supposed to be incredibly powerful. So Aquaman gets it. And he is kind of bestowed like Ocean Master right away because he can now talk to all aquatic life and they kind of do his bidding. And so he has charge of like this massive aquatic army, and he goes to find Orm, who is going to take on the Brine Kingdom, which is one of the 7 kingdoms that is just not going to bow down to him. So there was kind of a war between the other Atlantean kingdoms and the Brine Kingdom, led by Ocean Master, of course. And so here comes Aquaman and turns the tide, and, you know, Orm just loses all power. There's a final fight between Orm and Aquaman on top of I think it was a submarine or a ship, whatever it was. And again, very cool sequences, a regular fight on land, but still had stuff you just hadn't seen before in a fight. And I thought it was really cool. Aquaman kicks Orm's ass, becomes the king of Atlantis, and instead of killing his brother, he spares him and imprisons him and says, you know, we'll talk later when you're ready. And I thought that was pretty cool. I like the way they kind of ended that. Visually, like I said, this movie was stunning, beginning to end. I love going into a movie like this where it's just visually eye-popping all the time. And it was. There was some very cool, creative things that they did with Atlantis. There were great creative things they did with the Atlanteans in general, as far as character creation, the Brine people, King Rekko and his like half fish, half man people, other creatures that were just more like monsters than they were anything else. I mean, it really was creative. And James Wan behind this had a vision that came through very, very clearly and very well. It was truly, I think, the best Aquaman you could get. And thankfully, this movie was self-aware. It knew what it was. It knew that Aquaman wasn't always taken very seriously, and sometimes he's actually the butt of a lot of jokes. And so they kind of had fun with the movie, too. There was a lot of comedy bits to this, and they just tried to make it an enjoyable experience. Sometimes I will say that I do think that maybe some character development suffered from that. But again, we're talking Aquaman here. One review I said it was like James Wan was trying to make like an anime version, which kind of, yeah, I mean, it was like a live action version of an anime. It was really cool looking, very stunning. So I had a lot of fun with this. I just don't know that it could have been done better, honestly. I mean, when you have that material to work with, it's a very slippery slope. If you take it too seriously, you're going to lose. If you get too campy, well, you're going to lose. So I felt like this was a great middle ground. I forget what I gave it last time. I would say it's probably an 8.5 out of 10 for me. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I really marked out when you finally got to see Black Manta come on scene in the Black Manta suit. I was ecstatic. I thought it looked great, and it felt like he was a threat. Very cool. So, and you do get a mid-credit scene after the credits start rolling where the guy himself, the man that is Black Manta, is in the hospital bed, and he's talking to some guy, and this guy's like, can you tell me where you got this Atlantean tech? And he's like, first tell me where to find this guy, and he throws a knife at Aquaman's picture. So, clearly setting up for Aquaman and Black Manta, probably an Aquaman 2. And you know it's going to be a part 2. It made over $1 billion. So, a very fun movie, 8.5 out of 10. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. If you enjoyed this, hit the like button, subscribe, and share. My name is Kevin Jackowitz, Kaged Nation, out.